Hello and welcome to Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, 11M1 Through the Window. Music by John Williams, orchestrated by Angela Morley, this one, entirely, and reduced by myself. What an amazing cue. I've just finished watching and listening to Xanthi's fantastic episode on this, which is ESB 22 with Dan Golding, and it's superb. Just really, really interesting. 3.5 hours of absolute brilliance. So I loved that. So I just wish that this had been sort of done before the recording, that we could sort of all watch it and look at the music at the same time, because there's sometimes where it's difficult to already hear what's going on. I mean, it'd be a nightmare, really, to be perfectly frank, to orally transcribe all of this. I wouldn't want to do it. Occasionally, there are bits which we have to do, though, and that can get sort of rather challenging. So, hopefully, all the information's here. So, yeah, it's one which is very modular in the sense that we've got little bits of music. In fact, the original started 6 bars earlier, with 2 tubas playing very high, lots of sort of string clusters. I don't usually use the word cluster, but these are actual clusters, in other words, semitones, with various sort of pitch sets, sort of 3 sets of 4 notes, another 4 notes, a set of 3 notes, but they're not necessarily sequential in 12 tone. Williams tends not to do that very often, actually. And then we've got this sort of amazing passage here, which is very, very reminiscent of Lurking Danger, the incidental motif, and you can compare it with the Duel of the Fates chorus as well, later on, in fact. So I wonder whether the seed of that idea had been born in this. Who knows? Then we've got Imperial March. This is just an overview, by the way. Then this extraordinary sort of string passage, which is just sort of this whispering wind stuff going on. A sort of telescoped horn passage, which is very similar to the second phrase of the Imperial March. Here we go. So exactly the same notes in the same pitch, and then there's a sequence at the end, and it sort of repeats where it's sort of both together. Then we've got some interesting stuff where the flutes are a bit late on the recording, so it feels like ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-da-da-da. Either that or the clarinet's too early. It's quite difficult to tell, really, but the chord should come before the rest of the wind at that point. Then we got a bunch of ostinato stuff, which sounds so much like the Dies Irae motif 13. Sort of similar, anyway. Then we've got Yoda's theme in Canon at the unison. So actually at the octave, in fact. Well, it's sort of both, really, isn't it? Because we've got sort of piccolo sort of 3 octaves above, and bassoons as well, so it's a mixture of things, really, but at pitch anyway. And then we've got a little sort of F sharp pedal which goes into the Cloud City theme, so we revisit that. Then we've got a timp solo movement which goes to this sort of that sort of ostinato, and then we've got Han and Leia's theme over the top of that. That sort of stops when we have a canonic fanfare in the brass, and that leads us neatly to another sort of ostinato-y bit, which is based on the previous Dies Irae-like stuff. And then we also have Han and Leia theme again. And then after that, we have this sort of slight derivation of the Neapolitan Emergency. This is another sort of incidental motif. Not to be confused with the leitmotif, by the way. They're slightly different things. So that goes on and on and on and on, and it sort of builds. It's all sort of really chortal as well. So that's a definite defining feature. Then it all ends on C, with this sort of rather creepy scale degrees 5, 6, 7, 8 of C minor right at the end. And then we got sort of 44 seconds till the next Q after that one. So to the denouement of the whole thing. So it really gears up. It's an extremely exciting cue as well. It's about 4 minutes. So there's this took a while to do because there's just a lot to get through. So I will go as slowly as is necessary. So the first thing to point out is that the instrumentation is, as is always the case, is unusual. We've got 2 tubas, which you don't get in the live to picture version. There are 2 keyboard players all playing slightly different things. So keyboard player 1 plays the piano pretty much throughout, I think. Don't think there's any Celeste in this one. And then the second one is an electric piano as well, which sounds quite Celeste-y, but not quite as harsh or stands out. So that's maybe why they used it, especially in the very soft introduction. So in the film, we don't really get to hear that. We only we get to hear the sort of last C sharp of the tubas, and then this sort of little electric piano, which doubles the notes of the violins. It's just a chromatic set. So previously we had that going on, and this, that sort of thing. So yeah, so it's a sort of interesting selection of notes that Williams chooses, and often it's because he doesn't want to be wholly 12-tone, but he does want to be atonal. There doesn't seem to be a system that he uses other than sort of, voice leading reasons and just personal preference for things. But there doesn't seem to be sort of, there's no row, essentially, unlike Jerry Goldsmith, who often used tone rows and things like that in his work, as well as atonalism. So we start off with this sort of rather creepy, sort of almost horror-like introduction. And then we've got this dyadic theme. So if I play it in the piano, it becomes quite reminiscent of the Duel of the Fates as well, and the sort of lurking danger incidental motif as well. So probably a good idea to bring up the catalogue. So if I just type in lurking here, hopefully it'll find it. There we go. So this one, it says it's in episode 3. So it's interesting that it's in Revenge. But we've also got it sort of maybe the foundations of it beginning here. This sort of lurking, sort of impending doom is certainly the connotation. And what's interesting is that in all of the clusters that we've got, there's an absence of B. And I wonder whether that's a deliberate thing from Williams, because he then allows B to take place, because of course we're in B minor at this point. I should probably, so I usually put little thematic bits down, so I can do that as we go along. So let's just go B minor. So we got this sort of very stark, brutal, it says, Imperial March on the horns. So this bit here, it's quite slow, but we've got all of these scampering aleatoric strings, all of them sort of white notes until there. Sort of like these stabs of sound as well. And very sparse in terms of the accompaniment as well. It just does this with the piano and brass. Interesting rhythmic, sort of very disjunct. Like that. So, rhythmic-wise, it's always interesting to see how Williams does these things. So on the beat, it's not on the beat. It's not on the beat, and it's not really not on the beat there because it's a semiquaver out at that point. Bam. He doesn't really emphasize it with percussion either. So the percussion is actually off the beat here with cymbals, and on weak parts of the beat, upbeats, upbeat. And then he's using side drum as well in this. So in terms of the notes that we've got, so it's all sort of white note, sort of B Locrian, like that. And all different sort of, amounts of notes. So it's the cellos, and they're sort of terraced. So you get the cellos, then the violas come in, then the violin twos, then the violin ones as well. So it really builds up. And we've also got these chimes as well, which correspond with the sort of target notes or the main melodic notes. Then we get a little bit of, after the first stab, we have the second phrase at this point. Like that. So it's interesting how it's written so that the horns are joined by the first and second horn at this point, whereas before they weren't. There was just four. But look how it's harmonised. So here, all single horns, unison, and then they divide here, which will be two to apart. And it's felt possibly that it's too low, so that's why it's not harmonised in this C. Otherwise, it does that. Well, we've already got the trombone, so there's no real necessity for it. So interestingly enough, it's the third trombone. Whoops. That's doing the tune. As well, it's written as an A sharp in the score. That's because there's already a B natural, so it's just sometimes it necessitates that, because otherwise that looks really weird. So that's sometimes the case why you might find sort of enharmonic oddities in here. I put there's something rather stark about this iteration of the theme. It's barest bones only in all its sort of dark glory. Yes, I mean it's not. Although it's harmonised, that it's quite sort of, it's rather sort of stiff, basically, with all of these tremolandering strings as well. Then we've got a really interesting bit here. So we've got chromatic notes in. Let me just make that bigger for us. In here, in our pianos. So it's sort of white note, black note time. Like that sort of thing. So that's going on. And then we've got an octatonic scale. Missing out the G sharp. Like that, because otherwise... like that, but there's just not enough pedals for that to happen. So interestingly enough, so violin 1 plays the octatonic scale. So T1 means it's been transposed by one semitone. So instead of starting on C, it starts on C sharp. So those are the notes that are being played, but without that note here, which we don't find G sharps at any point, actually, interestingly enough. Then the second violin, which plays mostly in major seconds, is actually just an A minor harmonic scale. So we've got a combinatorial sense of two scales happening at the same time. And indeed, we've also got a chromatic set of 9 notes as well. So the only note missing in this case is the G sharp. We just don't hear it at all, which is interesting, I think. Maybe significant, maybe not. We hear it actually only in here, in the second violin. So maybe it's sort of filling in those notes at the same time that we have in that sort of octatonic sense. So it's a sort of almost an intensification of an octatonic scale with other notes. So like that. So you get this really weird sort of mush, basically, which is lovely, or mash. So an interesting sort of soup, a scalic soup. So that continues, and we've got these sort of little little bits of piccolo, E-flat clarinet as well, which is all based on little pairs of either major or minor seconds. So major second, another one, minor second, minor second, minor second, minor second. So little sort of pairs of notes at this point, just sort of scoping out what's going to happen. Then we got a lovely sort of almost octatonic subset, like that, sort of E flat 7 with a sharp 4, but starting on the A. That sort of idea. We can hear that it's sort of rather octatonic. This is interesting because I always sort of thought, where's that from? But actually it's just a rhythmically augmented version of the bars 7 to 8 of this, which I think I've already shown you. At least the pitches anyway. It's not, obviously not the rhythm structure of it. So it shows that, Vader's sort of like opening out, basically. He's sort of now at this point, really sort of, it wasn't a play fight before, it's now getting serious. But of course he doesn't want to kill Luke, but Luke doesn't know that. He wants him to join to the dark side. So he's perhaps showing him his power to sort of humiliate him. So that, somehow he'll be turned. But he obviously hasn't met Luke, so he doesn't know. That's maybe the sort of thing that Anakin might have done. Can you show me this power? Well, he is. Not from a Jedi. So then we got these little trumpet solos. That happens quite a lot in Williams anyway. In fact, I've just been listening to Dracula. There's the exact same sort of trumpet fanfare in that as well. Lots of similarities. So then we've got horns and cellos, a rare form of blend. So it's sort of interesting. So we're going from a sort of mixed mode G minor type thing. We've got dyads here, which actually lasts for a full sort of 2 beats, actually. So we've got that going on. And it's not even used... It's not even used in a normal way. It's in a target way or opening out. It's just used as a pair of dies, which gives us this sort of sense of we're not sure where it is going. And then the E becomes a little pivot for that E chord, except that we've got C major over the top of it. So it's a C over E. Which is a sort of hexatonic subset, really. Like that. And then we've got this sort of little flutes and clarinet moment. And that's the bit where they're slightly out on the recording, which I think is quite amusing. I'm going to try and find it, actually, because I think it's probably better if I can do that. Let's see whether it just plays through here. So coming up, so listen to the flutes. Coming. Yeah. Just don't play together. And then the flutes sort of catch up, sort of thinking, oh, crap, we missed our entry. Knowing that the clarinets are playing exactly the same note. And the oboes. So then we got another little bit of horn sort of moment, this sort of little bits of sort of minor seconds which sort of frequently crop up, and then we've got the start of this next bit, sort of the Dies Irae ostinato. Now Dies Irae does come up a lot in here. So, and it's always slightly different each time it comes in. So this one, Attack of the Clones, in Rey, Last Jedi, Jin's theme embeds a clear reference to the Dies Irae no motive, so even the non-anthology films. So this bit here, which is sort of incidental motifs, diminutive, this sort of Dies Irae idea. And here, So it's this particular one that I'm referring to, this Dies Irae, which is in all of the films. So pervasive, most importantly in A New Hope. But of course, it can be used in an alternative sense. So in this case, it's a sort of ostinato moment, which very quickly changes with a semitonal shift to B flat. So we've had this sort of B natural, and then suddenly it goes to B flat. So that's the bit where we have. So we've got sort of Yoda's theme. Also at Canon as well. And that sort of, that bit here is just sort of little bits of iteration of Canon as well. So an additional sort of point of imitation or Canon at that point with none of the rest of the notes in there. There's 2 bars edited, by the way, which is extra from the original. So either it's a editorial thing where they actually literally splice the tape, or they actually recorded it with 2 more bars. It could be to do with the extended edition, possibly. I can't remember what it was like in the very original, so difficult to know. But basically, there's 2 extra bars at that point. So then we get the continuation of Yoda's theme. Amongst this weird... It's very discordant, and we've got this, so there's a sort of octatonic implication to it, and then we've got little bits of sort of diatonic C minor in the harp, which sort of appears as well, and then it continues as it now shifts to C bass chromatic ostinato. So there, or octatonic. So not quite, because there are 2 semitones in there together, which is not octatonic. So it sort of shifts really interestingly. And then it shifts again. Like that. So interestingly that the canon changes to wait for the horns to catch up. So here. So it sort of just waits on the B until the B's reached, and then they're back together. And at this time, we've got a sort of little F sharp pedal, which feels like a dominant pedal. So that's where we have our Cloud City theme in. Interestingly, that even flutes play all that sort of very low register wind, which is a really unusual sound actually. But we got the violas and also doubling up, so it's sort of they re-emphasize them or just sort of port them a little bit. But it's an interesting little transition, those bars here. Yeah, and also that little sort of sense of timp at that point is really important. It just gives us this little sort of in to the new theme, because we've had this going on for quite a while, so that ostinato I'm referring to. So then, it wants to feel natural and also have some space as well, and obviously it needs to fit with the picture. So you're sort of saying, evacuate. So it's similar to what we had, but it's... So before, where we had those major sevenths, sort of languid floral sort of major sevenths. It's quite stark. So all above F sharp pedal. There's a little hint of it there, that little major seventh. And then we get back to the major seventh. But suddenly returns the ostinato. And a lovely transition at this point. So unison strings, but in semiquavers. And then shift to G major. So we get that sense of B minor with a G. So sort of B minor with a flat 6 or B minor over G, whichever way you want to think of it. And then this important, lovely timp solo, which actually picks out all the notes of B minor flat 6 as well. Then we got a little bit of figuration, which then leads to another ostinato, which is ambiguous because it doesn't sound like A minor, but it probably is. It's just that the emphasis is on the third note of the scale and the first note. The only thing I remember, it reminds me of a piece by Benjamin Britten called Hymn to St. Columba, which sort of... like that. And I think that's the accompaniment. So it's a sort of similar sort of idea. That shifting is deliberate, so that you can't quite tell the tonality of what's going on. But then it leads into Han and Leia's theme. So let me see if I can actually play that. Here we go. A little bit of flourishes. And it's interesting because of these sort of little 5/3 shapes. So that now sort of takes over a little bit. That sort of chordal idea. So it's like a D flat, but with a sharp 4. It's just that there's no... it just doesn't have the third in it. But that's kind of the implication. And it then shifts as well. So because, you know, we're sort of implied F. Sorry. Stop it. It's just I had things selected. There we go. So so F's implied, then a sort of implied D flat. Except now it's above D flat. So actually sort of B flat minor. And then that continues. So yeah, we've got a sort of C dim, which goes to E flat minor. And notice that it keeps shifting as well, in line with what's going on. E flat minor there. And that continues E flat minor with this little bit of filigree, digga digga dit, which is just actually kind of doing the same thing, just smoothing over the joins like that. So you get this little bit of flourishing, which is interesting, which just sort of fills in those little gaps. And then, as I said, before E flat minor, but over that sort of C and E flat. So a lovely sort of shift there, which is a tone and a half. But it's a tertial shift, really. Neo-Riemannians would love that sort of idea. Here, so it just sort of keeps going with the same ostinato. So here. So I'm going to keep playing it. And then I'll just stop it there. So a lot going on. So yeah, this all sort of keeps going. It's amazing how much energy this sort of produces, because without it, it doesn't really work. Because it's just long notes. But then when you put the rhythm, it sort of really is extremely impactful at that point. So then we got an interesting canonic fanfare, which starts off in the trombones. It's just those notes. So if you compare them with these ones, they're pretty much the same. Bum, ba-dum, bum, 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 bum. Now, interesting enough, they don't play that note, the trombones. It's actually omitted from the recording. I wonder whether it's something to do with changing trombone position at that point. So maybe that's in one position, but these notes are in the other position. So you don't keep, otherwise it's sort of a strange, it would be rather awkward to play. Bum, ba, bum, bum, bum. Whereas the trumpets are fine because they just use a valve. So that's not too difficult. And it's all sort of, so quartal, quintal, quartal, quintal, secundal sort of thing, sevenths and seconds the same. Another, so lots of perfect fourths. Then it shifts back, another perfect fourth. And then it's sort of still just stunk, but more tertial right at the end. And then more secundal, more quartal, quintal. Then a quartal sequence. And then dyads to finish at the end. And you can see here that it breaks out of the canon with the trumpets. It's really interesting, actually, how it works. So in vertically, what have we got? So we've got the sort of dyad. Then we got, sort of a consonance. Another consonance, this time a third. Going to a fifth, but it's off the beat. Consonance. 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 Not a consonance. It's a second there. Then another consonance. Not dissonance. Another dissonance. And we get a sense of key. Yeah, sort of climbing up to consonants again. Really interesting. Then we got this sort of suspended chord. Like that, which is wonderful. That sort of that horn sort of breakout. Notice that the pizzicato is just helping the transient of the horns, the attack of the horns at that point. That'd be a good name for the second film, Attack of the Horns. And then we've got sort of D flat with a C flat in the bass. So more dyads at that point. So a sort of D flat major chord. More dyads, which then go to a triad. Unusual one. So C add 4 sort of thing, or suspended. And then B minor. Not B major. So here. And then we've got sort of G flat major 7, kind of amidst the third, possibly. sorry, D flat, then diminished. And then a sort of very traditional ending. But this time, which is sort of a jazz thing really, he's got a tritone substitution. So instead of the D, he has the A flat, but he's included the D as well. So it's a tritone substitution with the thing it's substituting. And he uses that a lot. So you could call it A flat with a sharp 4. Like that. And that's why I said Neapolitan. This sort of flat major chord too. But at the same time having the dominant. And then we've got the main theme, this sort of G Lydian, which has a pedal pretty much throughout until it changes. So this is the sort of very classic theme. But then we've got these chordal danger sort of chords as well, I suppose. Lydian because of the C sharps present. Nice bit of cymbals. That's interesting. I keep thinking I'm hearing an F sharp, but it's not from there. It's actually from the violas, but it's really difficult to tell. It's very clever. It's a really it's a clever way of you thinking that there's more that there are a few more trumpets than there are by having that F sharp there. It doesn't get in the way of what's happening. It's lovely orchestration. Yeah. And now adding the trombones. Yeah, brilliant. And that sort of breakout. F minor 7. Really sort of haunting F minor to B minor. Like that. Really amazing. Really extraordinarily powerful. B minor with a flat 6. A bit of filigree. So Neapolitan Emergency. Kind of. With filigree. So now it's slightly different pedal, then back to G pedal. Still with a G pedal. With a 4. Lots of chordal. We get to hear those strings at that point, which are all PPP despite the that. It's very similar to the beginning of Prokofiev's Romeo and Juliet, where you get this sort of large introduction, then suddenly you hear the strings sort of come out of the ether. Let me sort of see whether I can find that. I think it's right at the beginning. So this is Prokofiev's Romeo and Juliet, by the way. That's the suite. Let's see with it. Yes, it does start off with exactly the same thing. So just have a look at the marking PPP, and then everything else is FF. It's a remarkable introduction, by the way. Let's just listen to it. So 1937, this was written. With this cascade. Amazing. And out of that sort of resonance, you get these amazing sort of strings. with beautiful sort of suspended harmony. Just a sort of superb idea, and it can be really powerful. So it sort of you know, basically makes it sort of segue into the next bit of the battle. What an incredible cue, and I love this sort of as it sort of really gears up. Bum ba bum bum. Really amazing sort of like that. So it's really A flat with a B flat, but it's because it's so I haven't written it. I've written a G minor 7 because it's almost really like that. We've also got some very strange things going on as well. So at that point, like that, but almost sort of going outwards. You don't really get to hear them. It's really, really weird. So I've kind of just ignored it, really, because it just overcomplicates things slightly. But basically, you've got a sort of B minor and B flat major over G. So it's a 6Z19B, basically. That sort of idea. And it gives it that sort of sense of urgency. The rest of it is pretty straightforward. So we've got almost sort of still D with the G in the bass. And then it changes here. It could also just simply be a mistake, of course. So it never goes to the right bass note. Like that. Because we got a C in the bass at that point. Still there. And then it keeps going. And then goes to the wrong note again. So it keeps going to the wrong note. Back to G. So there's sort of A flat with a sharp 4, omitting the third. And then eventually it's sort of the G becomes as dominant of C. That the C is not necessarily really implied at the beginning. So yeah, I mean, an incredible cue, really. It's really interesting how the main theme is orchestrated, so that we've got usually what the horns would be doing, which is this sort of, you know, there, but because they're playing the tune with the violins, which is quite unusual, having violins and the horn together in octaves. We've only got the violas doing the sort of the scampering, and this time we don't have sort of, you know, powered bass notes. It's just semi-breves instead of. Like that. And these sorts of figuration are vitally important to Williams. He uses them a lot, basically. I'm just sort of thinking, I think it's Luke's Rescue. He does the same sort of thing as well. So interesting. So what an amazing bit of music to have a listen to, and so much in it as well. So so much to learn from this. So who would have thought that just having a sort of Locrian stuff, ignoring the key, but at least having the starting point, would work with aleatoric stuff going over the Imperial March? It's another new one. Every single time the Imperial March comes back is always slightly different. There's no sort of real iconic stuff apart from the concert suite, which of course is not the film, it's in the concert suite. So it's interesting. And I hope you've really enjoyed that as much as I have. And so what we like to do again is to look forward to what's happening elsewhere. So We're almost at the end of the film, which is very exciting. So here we go. Through the window. So the next one is 11M2, 12M1 losing hand, then 12M2 to hyperspace. Finale, which is the amazing bit where all the sort of tunes come together again. And then we got the credits as well, which is also brilliant, which I've also done. So that concludes today's episode, and very much look forward to seeing you for the next one. Bye-bye for now.